Okay, well, we're gonna start with who's here because we have the DAP here, and obviously you guys are here in the room with us, in addition to a whole bunch of people online, which is fantastic. So what we're gonna do first, just so everyone knows, right, this is the November, October 16th, 2024 Silver Spring DAP meeting, and our item today is 8676 Georgia, and this is sort of the first submission they're making in the site plan phase of the regulatory approvals process. So first, I think we'll just have the members of the DAP say who they are, so we can have the record show who's here, and then we'll let the applicant team introduce themselves, and then anyone who's here from Park and Planning can just let everyone know who's here, because we can't see all the folks on the Teams call, but there's a bunch. So let's let the DAP member in the room introduce herself first, and then the DAP members online, and then we'll move to the applicant team in the room first and then online. So go ahead, Allison.
Hi, good to see you all. My name is Alice Enns. I'm an architect and urban designer. I work with Urban Design Associates based out of Pittsburgh, but I worked for Purdy Galvis out of Silver Spring for about a decade. I'm also a Silver Spring resident, so I walk up and down Georgia Avenue all the time. So I have two hats on the DAP. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for being here in person. Thank you.
Online DAP members, go ahead.
I'll go first. Hi, everybody. This is Chow Joy. I'm a landscape architect and practiced for over 20 years, and I currently work in the city of Alexandria.
Morning, everyone. Raj Kaspikar. I am a real estate developer working in the area for the last 18 years. I've done affordable market and currently working on some commercial development in the DMV area.
Thank you. So we also have, just so everyone is aware, David Cronrock is not here today. He's out, and I think as we've discussed many times in the past, Bill Bonstra, who's the other member of the DAP, this is his project, so he's not able to participate as a DAP member. Now we'll move to the applicant team. Can the folks in the room just start at one end, or whichever end you want, and introduce yourselves, and then we'll move to the folks online.
I'm Ronnie Ali. I'm a Bonstra Hessian architect. Been working on the project since the beginning.
I'm Michael Catelli with Bonstra Architects as well. I actually joined the company back in the spring and have been working on it since then. It's an exciting project.
Hi, Stacy Silver. I'm an attorney, land use attorney with Large Early Brewer.
Fran Rodriguez with Parker Rodriguez with the landscape architects.
Eli Perez. I'm also with the architect. I'm a staff designer of 3 years and have been with the this summer.
Andy Adams, architectural historian with A. Adams and Company.
Great, that's everybody in the
One more
room.
person on there. Liz is on.
So,
Rogers.
Anyone from the applicant team on the team's call, please introduce yourself.
This is Brian Corcoran with Roadside Development. Should be there shortly. Sorry, I'm running late.
Good morning, Liz Rogers with Larch Early.
Good morning, Pat LeVay with MHG Civil Engineer.
Good morning, Brian Bowen with Parker Rodriguez.
Morning. This is. Oh, go ahead. Well, sorry.
That's it. I'll be there. I'll be there soon. Sorry.
This is Paul Kalminski with Roadside Development.
Great, that looks like everyone. And of course, in the room, so I'm Tara from planning and Jay Tool from as an urban designer here as well. And online, I think we have a number of people from planning, and parks. And maybe to make it easier, I'll just call down the list and you can just say hi. I think Rebecca is here from Historic Preservation or Dan, or maybe both of them. I see both of your names on this participant list. Are you guys here? Stephanie.
Good morning.
And Adam, are you here as well?
I am. Good morning, everyone.
So I can see Adam is the regulatory reviewer, so he's also here. And is there anybody from Parks on the call? told them they didn't have to be here. So that was the other option. All right. So I think that should be everyone. Great. So we're going to get started. Applicants try and keep your presentation to like 15-20 minutes so we have enough time for discussion. Go ahead.
Thank you. This again, Stacy Silver with Lurch-Early and Brewer. Thank you all again for meeting with us today and providing feedback. As you all, many of you may know, the planning board approved the sketch plan and preliminary plan for the project. And as part of that, DAP had provided us with some comments, and part of what the design team's efforts have been since the approval by the planning board is looking at site design, and specifically regarding how we respond to some of the comments that we heard from both staff and the design advisory panel members. Our challenge continues to be that the property is narrow in scope, which has really informed a lot of the design. But we think that we've been able to address a lot of the issues with the help from landscape architects and architectural team and the commitment by the applicant. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael, who's going to start discussing where we are.
Sure. Thanks, Stacy. So I think some of the comments that we looked at and reviewed in the memo, a lot of it had to do with looking at our Tasty Diner on the corner and how we kind of make that a more prominent feature and stand out. And I think since you guys saw it the last time, we've since pulled this lobby wall back more where we had it previously. So this is helping the diner to stand out a little bit more, creating more space for outdoor space for a plaza, which in turn we've use that plaza to help separate the residential entrance more from the retail entrance further up the street. So as the residents come down Cameron Street, you can kind of turn and enter in through the side of the building. It gives them a little bit more of a quiet entrance as compared to being on the busy street.
That was something that we had heard from DAP, is trying to have some separation between the residential entry and the commercial entry.
Yeah. And so as part of the tricky aspect too on this site was there's the grading along Cameron Street and along Georgia Avenue is a little bit steep at times. And Brian or Parker Rodriguez, I don't know if you guys want to explain a little bit more.
Yeah, so while it looks like it's super flat, actually the grades kind of are all accumulated towards the western side of it. So I think what we were trying to do with the streetscape, I mean, there is this desire obviously of engaging. So there is a very strong retail edge along Georgia and the eastern part of Cameron, which, has a lot of relationship between sidewalk and street, and frontage, a retail frontage. But as we move to the west, then we end up having that great situation. So what we did in this iteration, and actually some of the comments even from staff of creating some additional porosity, have really sort of helped to open up that plaza. So the idea is to create this space that can be inhabited by the user or activated by the user of the diner or whatever retail happens to be there. But it is part of that sort of larger streetscape. And then use green to help us mediate grades and also create sort of a stage also for the residential entrance. So you can see we're using large amount of green to create sort of these plateaus. And I think that will help sort of green that experience as you go from east to west. It gets more residential in character, so that really helps with that transition. We've also used green at the other corner in response to comments also from residents. They really wanted to see a little bit more green, so this gave us the opportunity to concentrate the seating where it's usable for the diner and then use green to help sort of mediate all of the relationships. Then along Georgia, I know that, there is this desire to really activate that edge. Know the architects have located the entrance to that retail at the corner, and they'll explain a little bit more how that is engaging that streetscape.
And I think maybe the plan there is different than the one we got. It looks like there's an additional connection to the
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, but that was, so that was, yeah, from our last meeting with staff, that was a comment, where we had kind of integrated that, yeah.
To make it a little bit more porous and more.
Yeah. So that's, yeah. That's
And that really helps,
Yeah, it's an update since then. So speaking of, Georgia Avenue, this is the corner from that, and we, discussing the site, there's the interesting part about it is there's really 3 different frontages that we have to deal with. So on Georgia Avenue, we really embrace this idea of taking the language all the way down from the top to the bottom to create like a really dramatic architectural moment right along, the main busy street. So between, the articulation of our piers and our bands, I think that creates something really striking. And then, as discussed, getting a little bit closer, we're looking at this corner that Trini was talking about. And so we're really, we have the entrance here to the retail, but as we're exploring this a little bit more, the corner basically is the element there. It is the entry feature to that. So we have a canopy that's wrapping that and kind of pulling you around from the corner to the retail entrance. Then there's the landscaping discussed on the other side.
I guess just to focus on this, there was a comment, and we know in the staff report that talked about kind of basically Georgia Avenue and how there's not a door. And we wanted to just address that from the design intent. Your design intent was you have your canopy that basically creates the entry along kind of the whole corner.
Right. Yeah. The canopy is a bit of a point of activation there to kind of create the entry from Georgia around the side of the building to the door. It helps us with some of the technical aspects of grade too, but it creates that moment.
And we expect there's going to be some signage there as well when the grocer is announced. That helps obviously indicate kind of the announcing where you are.
And we designed it from the ground plane with the possibility of potentially even having some blue seating or some small seating, or potentially even a display of elements, who knows, even flowers, whatever it could be. So that's something that obviously cannot be committed at this stage because it's operational with the grocer, but the canvas is there for that to happen, and I think that will help activate that corner.
Just can you talk a little bit? Why can't you have a door on Georgia?
There are a couple of things. One is there is a grading difference and between the floor and the street. Again, it's sloping pretty rapidly on the first bay. So that one thing. The other thing is the grocer actually preferred to have the entrance there at the corner of Cameron. And we bought that very close to the corner of Georgia and Cameron intersection.
Can I talk more, or should I wait?
I think we should just keep going with the presentation.
Okay. Sure.
I just want to come back.
Clear. Yeah.
Because I think if you want to talk more about stuff, we want to make sure we see everything.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Just talk about the elevator bay.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the elevator in the location of that it is, that's kind of what we have coordinated with the potential grocer that's going in there. But we're exploring different materials right now, and we're kind of looking at that being a little bit more of a feature material on that. So that'll be something that'll be, a little nicer to activate along Georgia Avenue, a visual element to kind of create that. I think that kind of could potentially, in relation to her kind of displays or something, that be some sort of relationship to that.
Can I just ask one more question on this slide? Is the way you're rendering the bike lane here and the way it kind of curves around the corner and takes out part of the corner, is that just a rendering, or is that the actual proposed design?
I believe that's part of the design, part of the streetscape. Yeah.
And Pat Levay may be able to chime in.
I just want to make sure we know what's being represented.
Yeah, I think that's part of the crosswalk getting wider there. So there's a way
that was coordinated, with transportation.
Yeah.
We were looking for. Yeah. It just looks kind of like, straight.
Yeah. Because it does widen.
The wide angle.
Yeah. So here, kind of addressing the element of the facade behind the Tasty Diner at the parking garage. So this is where we've kind of kept exploring different options to make sure that we're incorporating both comments from both DAP, where we're looking at verticality, but we're also having to balance comments from HPC where they're asking for more horizontality. And so in part, part of this this effort, that's kind of what we're looking at here, where we're trying to bring in some vertical elements of this facade to emphasize it a little bit more. So you can kind of see in the next one, they're a little bit, closer up, they're a little bit stronger than what we've seen before, and trying to relate with the material finishes compositionally with the tower above. So we have these darker elements below, these darker elements at the tower above. And so I think what you guys may have seen last time may have looked similar to this, but we've since kind of been refining our compositional palette for this to make things harmonize a little bit more. So while we have the continuous framed openings around the majority of the parking garage at the base to really break down the scale, at the corner, we created a little bit something or a little bit special, which also would break up that rhythm a little bit, because that would be pretty overwhelming, I think, to run along that long site. And so this creates a little bit more of a backdrop too for the diner. Continuing at the same area, there were also concerns, about headlights from the parking garage. And so this is looking up from the street view along Ramsey Avenue. We have a 42-inch crash wall. So from here, this is in addition to this facade with our vertical elements, with the frame openings, we're kind of seeing that there's a lot of crash wall that's going to kind of keep the headlights out of the neighbors. So in terms of the building, sculpting the top, we've looked at creating an element for the top of the building using a couple different aspects. With the long site, we created a couple different towers, so it steps down as we go from Georgia Avenue to Ramsey Avenue. We have a core element, which is where we have our elevators kind of rising up to create a little bit of a tower piece. And then we have the roof line that extends over our residential amenity.
Do you want to point out here just the side of the building?
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, and there's another slide, but yeah,
Okay.
there was a comment also in the staff meeting a few weeks ago where, we had a little bit of a bare facade from our panels wrapping the corner to the neighbor to the south. And so part of the idea is continuing that same language of the framed openings around the corner, but because it's right on the property line, we can't actually have openings. So it's, refining that articulation as it continues around.
Because me ranch is like right.
Yeah, exactly. That's the parking lot. And so, kind of continuing with the top of the tower element, here's just another view looking at how we're refining our roof line element, how we're looking at our tower coming up, and how the two larger portions of the tower intersect. Yeah, the tower from the area below, just as we kind of see it. Yeah, see it in the skyline. I think we like that view a lot. It's kind of captures some of these elements from a little bit more of a lower area looking up. Yeah. And then just another view to highlight that the framed elements as they turn the corner, because as Mi Rancho's right down here in the lower area, so that we'll have something for that bare parking garage or parking lot next to it. Thank you guys. That's kind of a quick version.
The one thing that was actually we wanted to talk about too is that in terms of the coloring of the building.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have that.
Yeah, that was when we were talking about the.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the comments that we had heard was about the basically the area above the diner and how folks were looking for that to be kind of blending in with the architecture. And so as Michael was mentioning, as they were looking at the tower and kind of responding to that, you can see what initially was submitted, how they kind of refined it, elevated it further to basically further incorporate and the design element above the diner, but also highlight that as kind of the gem in which it's meant to be.
So this is the
this is the new rendering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what.
That's probably what. Yeah.
So now that the sun is darker, new rendering.
Do you have the view from Georgia?
Yeah.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
Yeah, kind of with that taller element for the profile at Georgia, we've also created that using different materials. So we have the lighter materials along a lot of the longer face of our east tower on Cameron Street, but we kind of emphasize that tower element between the massing where we have our kind of column of balconies there, and then the different materials as they go up and then sweep across the top of the building.
Could you talk a little bit more about your materials and sort of what do you have a thought? What,
We have some thoughts, but we're actually doing some pricing right now. So
Okay.
we haven't quite gotten into that yet. So we're kind of balancing those aspects.
So we are expecting that we may need to come back
Yeah.
and share with you specific materials.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at, you know, a precast, particularly at the podium level, right?
Mhm.
Potentially, you know, veneered or cast in with some sort of thin brick or terracotta type
Mhm.
material. And then we're exploring a couple different window systems, each of which have different optionalities for metal panels integrated, potentially, you know, precast on the western tower there.
Mhm.
Metal panels, sort of creating that frame, that visual frame that you see.
Mhm.
So we have a few different options. We're going through, you know, some constructability reviews, some
Mhm.
timelines, some material availability, and some costing exercises now, hopefully to inform some of those decisions.
Good. Yeah, because in here it looks like some of the lighter stuff was brick on the renderings, but
Yeah, I think
still-
that's where the
And
that's
if
where
you've
the
been, you know, analogous, I don't know if everybody made it, but we have a building at City Ridge, which it's a light thin brick.
Mhm.
It's the one that comes to the point. We've kind of used that as a model. That is a precast building with thin brick laid in as it was cast. You get the depth of the facade and some of the articulation that creates interest, but from a constructability perspective, it's actually pretty quick and simple. You know, you're putting in precast, not trying to model out lots of ins and outs with individual bricks. So that was the inspiration for the ground floor. So that brick that you read is the intent.
Mhm.
So now on to execution.
Got it. Okay.
What about the materials for the garage face along Cameron? What is that dark metallic screen material intended to be?
the which one?
That one. Up.
This one right here.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a few different options between, I mean, these are metal frames that are kind of going up in extrusions, but you know, I'm sure it'll be likely a slab cover that's metal at the edge. And then for the crash wall, we're kind of exploring a few different options as well, whether it's metal panel, whether it's a different kind of composite, whether we have a finished treatment on the crash wall. I think like that's part of this constructibility exercise that we're looking through.
And the portion that's looks like it's a ventilated.
Yeah, no, sorry, yeah, and we're also exploring like a mesh or perforated panel, some sort of screen element, which it's an open air parking garage, so we have to maintain our certain level of openness to it. But it's just something that'll kind of emphasize the verticality elements here that we're working on.
Any DAP members online want to weigh in?
Yeah. Yeah, Raj here. Let me turn on my video. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I turned it off. Thanks for the packet and more details. It would have been useful to get some dimensions, especially on the landscape and the areas that are around the Tasty Diner. Like just the scale wise, it just looks so tiny, and you know, like I see like 6 tables, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 tables, and it's just it would have been a little bit. I think I would have liked a little bit more dimensions on what is that space and what does that look like in relationship with the diner, the car, especially with the comment of, well, you know, we are trying to build something around it and give it more prominence. And I don't know, I just don't feel that looking at it. So I think a little bit more details on how that is being circulated would be very helpful. Also, and you know, I was looking at the earlier iterations which were submitted and then our comments, and I was a little bit just really surprised by this really grim looking panels and grays, and on the side, like Cameron. I remember it being a little bit more livelier colors, materials, or I know the comment was to highlight the diner, but not to the point where the building looks like that the building doesn't look trying to be severe. That whole panel, the metal, the mesh, and because at the end of the day, a lot of those people walk on camera, and I was, and I am one of those who go to restaurants in the back there. And what happens up there, like, tens of floors up, it's the pedestrian experience that I'm looking at. And this just looks terrible. I'm sorry, I was trying not to make that word, but it's almost looks like a step back from where we were when I had looked at the earlier. So not to be a Debbie Downer, but yeah, I was just really taken aback by this packet, and I was expecting it to be much more lighter. I thought that's what we had articulated, or I had articulated last time. So I'm really taken aback. And if it's, and again, I'm a developer, so if it's a costing exercise, I'm sure there are options there that could make this better.
Why don't we, maybe we can take each one in turn.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with the landscape?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Patrick, good morning. So, interesting. I'm gonna try, Brian on my team is actually taking some dimensions, so he just sent them to me. It's exactly what I thought. We were trying to model that plaza to be something that wouldn't overpower the diner itself. And interestingly enough, it's about sort of the same dimensions. It's 37 by 25, which is a pretty sizable space. The illustration of those tables and chairs is just a placeholder. You could definitely fit a lot more, and it could be used even for different things. Like you could have a small little event sort of filling out, and the idea is really to use that space to help activate the streetscape, but also complement the diner, because the diner is a small space, even though it will be working with some of the interior retail space. This will provide some outdoor area to stage outside as well.
And just as a reminder, we are required to do our overall public open space offsite. We have to pay a fee in Silver Spring just because this property was not designated for doing public open space on site.
Right.
But certainly, Trini.
Yeah, but we're providing, open space. It's not required, but it is, something that helps the activation of that streetscape and sort of engage with the passerby.
I just have a quick question, and definitely want to hear from the other DAP members on this too. Just looking at this revised iteration, it looks like the space that is between the building and the sidewalk, that notch, is essentially defined as three distinct things. There's an entryway to the residential lobby, and there's that green sort of patch with what looks like trees in it, a couple of trees in it. And then there's a seating area for the diner. And I'm just wondering if you all have looked at version of this where it is more just one space.
Unified, yeah.
And so it would feel a lot.
Yeah, we actually did that.
Bigger.
So we had looked at it. First of all, there's grade. There is several feet of grade.
Yeah.
So it will never be one plane. It will have to be stepped. So we did look at that. Actually, the initial schemes had more of an integrated approach to it, but I believe even staff or DAP panels had actually talked about kind of creating a more distinct residential area. And I do think that residents will also feel like they would want to have a more distinct, entrance to their building. So what we did, and there's also the goal of sort of bringing in some green, as you can see, because our building is right at the edge, there is very little opportunity of greening that streetscape. So these kind of help us do two things: provide some greening, mediate grades, provide some buffering between the two uses, and then create a sizable patio and extension area for the diner. The other thing that is not easy to see here, but there is grade on this direction and there is grade on the other direction on both. So we've used some of that green to kind of mediate that, but it's fairly low. So the idea is that visually it's all part of one space.
In terms of architecture, maybe we could talk a little bit and then you guys can chime in, or Brian, I don't know if you want to. So again,
Before we move on to that, I just wanted to see if Shaijo or Alice or anybody else
Speak up.
had,
Yeah.
just so we can wrap that discussion before we get over to the next one.
Yeah, this is Chow Joy. Yeah, if you go back to the plan here, I'm just wondering the thin, like screen green space here, separating the sidewalk and the dining area. Can we open it up more to, just so people easily access to this space? Or is it because of grade change we have to have this thin hedge, or because of, green space requirement, we have to meet that percentage?
So there's two things to that. One, obviously there is grade, so that's the biggest issue. The other one is we have to put stairs if we open it, and as you can see, the property line, we cannot put steps or walls in the public right away. So that's our biggest challenge.
Yeah.
It has to be inward. So the places where we can open it up is, we're open it pretty wide at the entrance of the diner. And then we're opening at the other end where we can put steps inside of the property line. I don't know if it's hard to see. I don't know if you can get closer. This is a little difficult to see.
Yeah. But just as you're doing that, this was like a many design conversations to get to this point. It's like such a, you guys can explain more.
Right. And then sort of balancing out the flexibility for the user. The more entrances you have, the more difficult it is to control, for liquor and all of that. So these allows, it's a good balance of porosity and accessibility and, flexibility for the user. This planting area, it's actually quite small. So it is very visually connected. So it's going to feel like part of the same space, but it's the tool that we have to mediate grades.
I was going to raise that. Like, the intention is
no,
right? Like you're not visually obscuring the diner. One of the things, that sort of substantively went into this, because of the grades at that point, you had really two options. One was to slightly elevate the diner on the west, right? Or slightly depress the diner on the east, right? Such that, the foot or 18 inches or whatever that is, of the bottom of the streetcar would have been below the patio in order to, keep it flush, right? There's an ADA requirement to have that door be flush when you enter the diner as the primary entrance for the retailer, right? So when you fix that point, you can only go one way or the other. This was our collective solution.
If I show you all the schemes, you would actually.
I understand. Yeah, just by looking at the plan, it looks a bit truncated, and I'm just wondering how we can celebrate this historic facade by not having three different entrances. Because right now, just by looking at the plan, I completely understand what you're talking about, being a landscape architect. And I wonder if we can expand the dining area even larger so that, this visually amenity, or I don't know, art piece or sculpture piece, just tuck in this green space. So to celebrate this larger green amenity space to the diner, to the tasty diner. Or is that the intent of
we could
keeping
probably
that?
expand it a little more. I think there is also a matter of proportions, between the size of the diner and the outdoor area. That's what we were trying to balance as well. So, kind of expand a little more. I don't know if you would need more space outside.
I don't think so. I mean, I think the first thing in my head was like, if we put an actual representation of like how a restaurateur would seat that, right? Like that's going to be a lot of, there's going to be more seats outside than there are inside for a 2,800, 3,000 foot restaurant, at this point. And then it becomes an unserviceable critical mass relative to kitchen size. I mean, there's lots of dynamics that go into this. So
I like I think the size of the terrace actually feels pretty good, but I think that Xiao Joy's point about the access and sort of opening those pieces up a little bit, and even like the new one, pulling the green back. I know there's grade issues, but having that feel more connected to the residential entrance so that there's a little bit more of a synergy between those two. And then offering like even a little bench for the residents, like waiting for your Uber driver, like right there in the front. So that feels
Yeah,
like
we were gonna do that
an
actually,
entrance
yeah.
piece.
No, absolutely.
But what I will say, I remember the challenge and I was looking back at the old submission last night, like with the steps that were sort of parallel to the sidewalk, and it was a very sort of uncomfortable, challenging space. So I feel like we're heading in the right direction here. It's just like the really narrow walk that's parallel to the diner at that entrance. Like if we can just expand that opening and access to the diner a little bit more with the grades. I know it's a grading issue as things are changing.
what is that dimension, Trini? Like what is the width of that walk? What?
Feet, but,
Yeah, like there's.
we literally have that. I mean, that is gonna be very.
So I joke, I don't know if Paul's on the phone, but I would gladly take back that piece of land that is now public right of way between the
Yes.
sidewalk and our property line. That was deeded over when the streetcar moved here, because that would give us a lot more flexibility.
I'm wondering, and I know we need to move on to the bigger issues of massing and garage facades. If I think two things. One, when you all come back, I think it'll be really useful for everybody to see some ground level views of what that looks and feels like. And then trying to make these three parts more seamless, as opposed to fully distinct pieces of this plaza might help. And then to Shahjoy's point, is if there's a way to, even where you have the string of lights, there's two rows, there's one on the left of the screen and the right. If there's a way to have the steps maybe align with the string of lights that is on the right column of it, and it goes directly to the sidewalk, it might help, even though the steps will be within your property, if they are more directly related to the sidewalk, that might help. I think there's ways to solve this. We are almost at a point of good consensus, but some views from ground plane and some seamless connecting of the three parts of this plaza would probably get us there.
Yeah, I think the other thing I was gonna say is we're looking at this, but we're looking at a plan, which I understand, we're looking at a plan of this. We're zooming in to a plan that's not drawn at the scale that you would want to see this at to truly understand the details. And so I think in addition to looking for some views inside the space or close to it, I think just a zoomed in plan at a bigger scale with more detail that would give us, we're looking at, basically a diagram from a corner of a much larger plan that's drawn out of scale where you wouldn't get the kind of detail that we're talking about. So I think when, assuming this comes back, that'd be something else we would ask for is now that, and I actually also like the scale better now in this iteration.
Seating for reserved for the restaurant?
What do you mean by reserve?
Will your residents be able to sit on these chairs and tables if they want to, if they're not?
I mean, presumably if the restaurant's not in operation, but the intent is for it to be wholly serviced by the restaurant.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that's also important, because if the seating is purely being used by restaurant in that the lights are out after the restaurant is closed and the residents can use it, then you don't want that seating to take up the whole plaza.
So, I mean, listen, right? Like I hesitate to say it's a de facto public space, right? But it's a de facto public space. Like, even if it's reserved for the restaurant, like that planting's low, right? Like it's not going to be fenced off, right? So the last thing I want, having, the number of residents living adjacent, to have this cold, dark corner, right? So from an operational perspective, there's going to have to be, lights and activity and part of the, the security watch, such that even if the restaurant is not operational, right, in the evening or late hours of the night, it's an approachable space, right? We have 480-ish apartments, and all of their respective, occupants coming home 20 feet away from that dining area, right? It needs to be, inviting and welcoming and well lit and all those, sort of things. So, I guess to sum it up is even when it's not in use, it'll feel,
Yeah, and that,
open. And
I think
like-
that's a common goal here to kind of work towards.
Exactly.
Should we move on to architecture?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Should I add, I have lots of comments on the architecture before we.
Sure.
Talk
Yeah.
about it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just, so first off, I wanted to take a step back at the whole building and say, I feel like the building's moved forward really nicely. It's really exciting to have you all come back and see it turn into a real building and have some of those initial ideas articulated on the facades. I appreciate all of the views that you've provided. But I think that there's a lot of really dynamic things happening with the massing on the Tasty Diner side of the building. And you can tell that you've spent a lot of time with how that rooftop terrace works, how the canopy works, and how the top of the building looks. And I think that there's a couple of things that I would like to see on this view specifically. I think this is we've spent a lot less time talking about Georgia, but the reality is this is the most important part of this building. This is what everyone will see. This is going to be the first, tall building out of the ground in Silver Spring. It's going to be hugely exciting and amazing on this corner. And so thinking about how we light that, how we carry that massing up, do you have the view from the other side? From the south, from Georgia Avenue.
Yeah.
Before it's I think it's maybe the first one. So there's a lot of dynamic things happening on this back facade, which is really exciting, and I think you've done a great job with. But then I do sort of agree with Raj's comments on the Tasty Diner piece above the building. So I can talk more about that in a second, but I really want to focus on the Georgia Avenue side. There was one I had it in my.
We may.
Did you pull it? If
From
this
Georgia Avenue on the street.
It's this one.
Yeah, we have that further in.
Yeah, that's as you're driving Georgia Avenue.
As you're driving.
Yeah, that's it right there.
Oh, that's it. There it is. Yeah. So, there's two different views that we looked at from Georgia Avenue. I think clarifying there, it looks like there's a little bit of a massing move, but not really a huge massing move. There's a change in materiality. And then when you turn the corner, it's not really, there's like a change in material without a plane change. And I think that all needs to be clarified and defined. So, you talk about this verticality coming down to Georgia Avenue and grounding the tower. And I think we're breaking the rules here, and it's a great place to break the rules, but you really need to emphasize that and think about the top. How are we carving the top a little bit more? Whether that black mass comes down just a little bit, whether the white mass pulls back, whether the black mass pulls forward a little bit, what are those things that you can do to play with that corner so it really becomes this beautiful beacon on Georgia Avenue, because that's the corner that everyone's going to see. And I really appreciate all the massing moves you've done to terrace down to the townhouses and all of that, but let's spend a little bit of time up on this front corner. And I think it's close. There's a few more elements that need to happen. And then we have to talk about that elevator bay that's on your corner of Georgia Avenue, because that piece is, again, it's Georgia Avenue. We're celebrating this. I understand that there's the grocer in, but not having a door on Georgia Avenue next to a building that's already a huge barrier on Georgia, when you have buildings across the street that have all of these entrances, I feel like you really need something on that corner. And can you rotate those elevators 90 degrees so you can at least get one door right on the edge? I don't know exactly how it's working, because there's an airlock to the grocer. So I don't understand why the grocer, there's a controlled space there on the corner. Why can't you get a door on Georgia Avenue and not have your elevators and a blank wall along those first 5 stories at the ground plate? You've done this wonderful job creating this engaging Cameron facade, thinking about how people move and react, but let's think about Georgia Avenue.
Can we pause there just before we go on? So maybe we'll talk about Georgia first, and you guys can talk about your design intent, but I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of the challenges with the elevators as well. And
yeah,
so do you guys want to talk a little bit first about the tower, and maybe Brian and Will, you can chime in too?
Yeah. You want to go to the floor plan?
Yeah.
We have about 15 minutes left for the session in total, so I just want to keep everyone.
So you can see here in the plan that the corner element, so coming down, naturally, then we have a recess there. So it's about several feet. We are looking at it if there is a way to push this one a little bit further, but it breaks down because the corner massing coming in, and immediately you see balcony and the recess facade. So that's happening on this one, to your point, to your question.
So it is happening here, but then around the other side, I think when you look at the views, there's a change in material up above on Cameron Street on that corner, but not a change in massing right
Yeah,
there.
Well, yeah, that plane, yeah.
Yeah, and so in the other views, it looked like the color also changed on the top floors. I don't know, I just feel like you could define that as an element more clearly from both directions, so it feels like.
Yeah, there's like ways to articulate that vertical edge,
And
to
it's
separate it
not
out.
a
It could be a subtle
And
shift. Yeah.
there is a height difference at the top too.
Yeah,
There is between the massing, which will accentuate that.
So if I'm hearing correctly, it reads like a tower in one direction, looking south, but then when you turn the corner, the read of the tower completely gets inverted because the white mass becomes more prominent. So I think trying to get some hierarchy between the two parts of that facade would be
Say that
helpful.
again. To what?
So, yeah, you see this view versus the other view, when you're coming down south and you look at it, you have a very prominent sort of grounding of the tower. The dark panels go all the way up, it reads as one thing, but then when you turn the corner, it's almost that mass in this view looks secondary to the white slab that's coming across. So I think the comment is, can we
It's clarify
clarify
one or the
where
other.
the tower
Like,
is?
Is it the
whether it's
vertical
white
tower
piece
or is the white
or
behind
the
it?
dark piece, and trying to differentiate the two based on whatever you pick to be the primary kind of tower.
Flip to the sort of opposite rendering, looking
Yeah.
south. I'm just curious.
And I think you changed it actually from the original, yeah.
Yeah,
So
we had
you've gone in a better direction than here in our initial packet. It was in the same plane and it just went white, black, and you couldn't figure like what were you reading? And there you have the white.
Yeah.
You lowered your white, so it's a better read now than it was.
Yeah, the ground's going up and that's creating the top of the massing.
Do you have the head-on from Georgia, or you got the zoom in?
The closer ones?
Yeah.
Closer ones.
Then do you have one? I don't know if we have one, kind of the interim, right?
And this
Looking
is the most
north.
prominent view, obviously.
No, not an elevation kind of.
Yeah, I don't need to believe it. I have an idea in my head, but rather than trying to work through it here now, I understand your point. I think what's not reading well, at least to me, are those balconies, right? And using that as an opportunity to transition between the corner element and the general facade. Like it reads very strongly here, right? When you see that,
Yeah.
foot or two projection balcony in the recess, like
Yes.
your eye says, here's the corner, here's the main building, right? And you kind of lose that on the south side, even though we have those balconies. And I don't know if they just don't project as much or if something else is going on, but I'm hearing your point, right? We have those balconies, but they don't come down. We need to massage that to make it kind of close the corner, if you will, on both sides, I think.
And this is good to see both elevations next to one another. The white grid of that sort of the foreground element, the tower essentially turns into the wall when you turn the corner. So if that's the direction, just making that really clear and clean with your massing moves. And
I also think I love your software and SketchUp, but like the coloring continues to be a challenge, right? Like it's not supposed to be white and black. It's supposed to be these warmer tones of grays and off whites and whites, very, again, akin to the point at, City Ridge. And just the rendering software comes out very harsh. And I think it's important. We'll get around. I heard the comments about the backdrop to the Tasty Diner. again, I think it's like whatever shadow, button you guys click makes it read very dark and cold.
Especially on that one, because there's two layers. When you go far, they actually collapse and it becomes all black.
So I think, it's important for us to maybe just take some actual pictures of materials that we're looking at, potentially bring them in here to you guys and, have a little tactile experience. And, that's what we do with our design team. It goes a long way, right? Because the other thing, and for everybody I know knows this, but just to beat a dead horse, I guess, right? Like the grays come off as like dark and cold in these renderings, but in actuality, they're these mica colors, there's this metallic, there's undertones, like they're very rich composition materials. And the fact of the matter is you just can't render them, right?
That's true, but I think you're heading in the right direction on George Avenue from the difference between this and what you showed in this presentation. So I think that's good. But I did want to say, I agree with Praj on this facade. I think we need to talk about it. I think it's nice I don't mind having that separate massing to sort of be a stage set for the Tasty Diner, but it just, the mesh material reads like, fence, like metal fencing, like just get rid of that. And then also just think about the expression here, because I think it's very successful what you've done with the garage on the rest of the building, but then you see this and it's just dark and heavy and hovering over the Tasty Diner, and how it had a little more lightness before, even though it was more horizontal in the earlier submissions. That was lost, and it's part of it's the rendering, but also just what that piece is, I think.
Some of the things to sort of think through there as well would be if we are introducing verticals, which we appreciate, can those verticals actually align with the base behind the facade and the column grid? Because right now they seem to have kind of a rhythm of their own. I think that helped tie everything together, but I do want to make sure that the point about the elevators was clearly stated and noted, like that's a big concern for staff. I think the DAP is resonating some of those comments. So really looking at ways to open up that corner by realigning the elevator bays was something that I wanted to make sure was clearly stated and noted, and discussion to be continued, but that's something that's really important for us to make sure you all respond to and sort of come back with and talk about.
Just want to check in with Praj and Shahjoy if you have anything else you want to add. There's like 5 to 7 minutes left of this conversation.
Just a question on the use of the Tasty Diner car. Is that I heard restaurant, so there will be a restaurant there, or maybe I just missed it. What is going on?
That's the plan. That's our goal. We're talking to a few folks who would operate a F&B operation out of the space, and it's the streetcar plus a portion of the building behind it, right? So
there will be some kind of a connection there. I'm assuming like a commercial kitchen behind it, if you do, or a cafe or whatever.
Yeah, and this was one of the reasons why we, struggled over the last year with, what that separation could be, such that the kitchen and the exhausting and the makeup air and all the schmutz that nobody wants to see isn't going through the roof of the streetcar, but can actually come back into the building. So it's out of sight from, the public perspective.
Yeah, I think you were reading my mind when you said, I was just like, wait a minute, what? How is that exhausted? And then you have garage with like this mesh all around. It just didn't seem like a very good functional operational situation. But that's all. That was my question. I'm really hoping in the next reiteration, more attention is given to like a pedestrian experience on how they would interact in that plaza. With the diner, and then those facades, the severe facades that are in this reiteration.
And I think in the plan, this also sort of notes the point where currently the entry to the grocery store is, unfortunately, because of the way the bike lane kind of swings in, it feels a lot more pinched to approach that from Georgia. So if there's a way to keep the elevators in that area generally, but turn them. So you have more of an openness onto Georgia where you have the most sidewalk, which it might be even better for a grocer to be able to use that space for setup and things like that. And then there's a visual connection between all of that, and the elevators are the way.
Yeah, I think we can drop some spot elevations. I think we're, that sidewalk, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, even where it's pinched on the hard corner there, other end. Like is probably fairly substantial, but we can drop that dimension down. I was just looking at the grade difference right there. I mean, you're at 350. I actually pulled up the tenant layout plan that they had done so far. They were showing like 1.5 foot difference between where their existing entrance is and the east side where those elevators are, which, drives where the slab in the store goes, which then drives a lot of other things. But I think we can study it. We can show you those studies, and then we can show you potentially some of our other constraints as to where and how we set the elevation for the grocery store, and what those implications are, because they do run all the way west, right? So, there is the loading dock, right, that is set by the grade at Ramsey. And then the store kind of runs off of that too, and you can't introduce lifts and elevators to offload a truck. That becomes incredibly problematic. So it is a delicate balancing act here, but I hear what you're saying, and I'm happy to look at it and see if there's something we could do there.
Or even like rotate the elevators so the indoor is to the right of the elevator, so the elevator wall isn't creating a dead wall on Georgia Avenue.
Yeah,
and then your entrance, even if it's at the corner versus where it is, you're moving it over. At least that feels like a transparent lobby, and you can see the people. Right now, it's such a barrier to Georgia, and because of your neighbor being such a barrier to Georgia, it's like this terrible block urbanistically on Georgia Avenue, where we have like the new moms up the street and all
the new garage across the street. That is a 7-story garage.
A lot of opinions.
So do I.
But there's one more. I have one more comment that's separate from the elevators.
Yeah.
Just a quick one. If we could go to the view on looking north on Georgia from the south, the other one. I think this is a function of the pool deck, but massing wise and design wise, that lift that hovers over the massing is very inconsistent with the rest of the architectural character of this building, where you have these vertical elements that go straight up. So I'm assuming that is a function of your beautiful amenity design up there, which looks phenomenal. But maybe is there another way to architecturally express that so it aligns better with the language that you've developed so nicely on the rest of your building? It's sort of, you don't really notice it, and then you're scrolling through, you're like, what is that and what's going on at the top? This character goes up. So that's my last small architectural comment on the building.
Okay. So it is 10:31, so I want to make sure we just ask the DAB members. It sounds from this conversation that there are a lot of comments, but I need everyone to sort of say formally, yes, we'd like to see this again. And if people have, I've written down a whole bunch of requests that we've talked about, but if there's anything in specific that the DAB members would like to see in terms of exhibits upon resubmission, this is the time to kind of put those out there. But I want them first to confirm verbally for the record that we're asking the applicant to return to the deck.
Yes. This is Prash. Yes, we are asking.
Did you have anything specific, Prash, in terms of exhibits that you would like to see?
Yes, I think the more views of like the pedestrian experience on Cameron as well as Georgia, that would be great. I think one of the suggestions of maybe the materials being considered, bringing them physically, or not all of us can come in. So maybe send us a spec that we can look up. I mean, I'm in developer business, so I'm sure I can find one if I can't make it to the Wheaton office. Because I think from the point that is being made that the colors are different on the screen than what you are assuming, so then I would love to see that.
Thank you. Joy?
I think Parker Rodriguez explained really well about how, how they already explore many options on the plaza space. I don't know if there's any improvement that, they're gonna make. So I don't know. Do you feel like anything that you can improve on the plaza space to make it more open and to celebrate it more?
I think we asked if they can bring, more detailed plans and some 3D views from inside that space so we can understand, it seems like their intent is to have some visual connection between those three zones, but that's hard to read from the plan we saw.
Sure.
So
That will be nice.
looking for that. And it sounds like, that's something that would really help us all understand that space. And Alice.
I think we've covered all the things.
Okay.
And just an enlarged plan, I think of that with the spot elevations. I think that's helpful, like that plaza's a little lower than the entrance to the building and that would be great.
And also we talked about some key dimensions of sidewalks and pathways in terms of the enlarged plan. Okay, so that ends this particular item. Team will resubmit when they're ready. Of course, I'll summarize this in notes that will probably go out to everybody early next week, and I'll try and include, as we usually do, a list of exhibits that the staff would like to see included in the next submission. But thank you guys very much for coming, and thank you to everyone for participating. And enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.